Brandon,
Hey, Alan.
and welcome to Dice Over Everything, the miniatures gaming podcast.
Yep. So you know how you know a game is a beer and pretzels game?
Yeah, if you can drink beer and pretzels, and the game is at its best while you're doing that while playing it.
Yeah, but if you don't already know the game, I think it's a good way to know if you've never played it before. If it's gonna be a
Okay.
beer and pretzels game, it's when they literally name it after snacks.
If it,
You know what game I'm talking about?
no.
No, the latest box of Kill Team. They just called it Nacho Mound. It's literally just with your plate of nachos.
Okay, and so I'm not sure that Kill Team. They're trying to sell that to you for sure, but I
Yep.
think that's false advertising. I think Kill Team Nacho Mound would be. It's a great name for a beer and
Mhm.
pretzels game. I'm not sure that you can play it as a beer and pretzels game.
Yeah, that's why they've got to push the beer and pretzels name so hard because it's
Yeah,
really
to,
not.
to override it. Yeah, they're like, yeah,
Mhm.
maybe. Look, it is called Nacho Man. All right.
Well, it's
So on the
unfortunate.
other hand, though, if it's
uh,
not named after nachos or other beer and pretzel type of things, you have a lot more trouble.
Oh, if it's got like a really hardcore name,
Yep.
what would be a
Something
hardcore
like
name for a game?
maybe Malifaux.
Yes. Or even making it like French to make it even more complicated and be like faux.
Yeah, Malifaux to make it sound a little bit more French. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
so that's the game we're going to be talking about today, Malifaux.
yeah, so I think we've played like some test games with before, and you've played with some of our friends,
Yep.
and you bought the miniatures and read it over. So I played with your guys,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah, I
I don't
got
know.
two different armies because one of the great things about Malifaux, if anyone doesn't know what Malifaux is, it's a miniatures, uh, small squad size miniatures game. So it's a skirmish game between 6 to 10 guys basically per side, where the theme is basically um, in the Victorian era, basically. There was a portal that opened up, and people went over there and found and basically discovered that you can gather magical crystals that allow you to create to use magic in Victorian era. So basically, what happens is that in it, the game is about these guys basically who are crossed over into this world. So it's not that many people who are basically fighting over these crystals, basically, and control over the mining operations. And because it's set in that time period, there's a lot of like cowboys and what do you call it? A lot of unique themes that are great, honestly. And the thing that makes Malifaux really stand out uh, is the miniatures, or that has made it really stand out, is the miniatures, basically.
Yeah, because I've bought the miniatures before just for the sake of painting, and basically built a diorama out of them. And some of them they were meant to be able to come out of the diorama, but then they got stuck in the diorama, so I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't bring them to paint to play with. But
So you
they
couldn't
were really
play.
cool to paint as a diorama for one crew.
Yeah, so basically, these are some of the, I guess the first reason why you might want to play Malifaux is because the miniatures are really great, and they have a lot of themes that are not really popular in the wider world of miniature gaming. So just the setting of Victorian, you'd think it would just go heavy steampunk, but instead it has this like, what do you call it? Like bayou kind of theme mixed with cowboys and martial artists and stuff like that, all kind of thrown together. So instead of going into the straight, excuse me, Victorian era steampunk kind of thing you would expect from normal miniatures, this one is like very quite different. And the basically since second edition, they have decided to do really high quality plastics. So not the plastics are not as good quality as Games Workshop, but besides Games Workshop, I think they're the best plastics you can get on the market.
Yeah, the quality might not be as good, but I think the designs are excellent. So that's
Yes.
what's really attractive. That even though like the detail might not be quite as deep, and just the assembly
More
is going
crisp.
to be
Yeah.
the assembly is well known to be more difficult than most other plastics. So that's a small
Yeah.
downside. But if you're a miniature player, you can kind of get used to it.
Yeah. And the quality of the designs, like you said, they're not always hits, but overall they're quite high. They are comparable in terms of quality to Games Workshop styles, except that their style is not heroic. So they don't have giant heads and ham hands. Instead, their artistic style is a little bit more akin to 2D styles, where heroic people are a little bit more stretched out. So
Yeah,
instead of
almost like
having like your character being like 5 or 6 heads tall, which is, if you saw someone in person like that, you'd be like, wow, this guy's a giant head.
yeah, I almost think of
Instead,
Nightmare
they're
Before
more,
Christmas. I almost think of Nightmare Before Christmas, where they're all like super tall and slender.
yeah, yeah. So instead, they have people, if they look deformed, they look stretched out deformed, and it's obviously an artistic style, as opposed to a lot of the times when you look at heroic miniatures, it looks like it's a mistake where they're trying to uh where it's like a child made your miniature, right? Like your child designed the person's body sizes. Like your head is giant, is super big, because children generally see the head as more important. So when they draw it, their head is like super big. You know how like a child, when you see a child's drawing, oftentimes the first thing they draw is a head with the arms and legs sticking out of the head, because they recognize, when they look at a person, they think about a person as a head with arms and legs as being important. That's how they see people, right? And it's only after they get older they're able to actually understand the proportions and everything like that.
Actually,
That's
realize
what
that.
I think of as heroic style. So just, I'm just throwing in my what do you call it, mandatory bashing of heroic scale on every single one of our podcasts in there.
Yep. And how Malifaux actually doesn't do it at all. There's
Yes,
there's people who, if they're stumpy, they're meant to be stumpy because that's their character,
exactly.
and it matches
And
their art.
yes, it's a lot more artistic and a lot more akin to, like normal heroic scale in art would be, instead of being 7.5 feet tall, which is a normal person in like realistic scale.
7.5 heads
Uh,
tall.
yeah, 7.5 heads tall. Like heroic in normal art is like 8 or 9 heads tall to make them look heroic.
This giant body
Not,
with his tiny
yeah,
head.
it's not the opposite. I don't know. Okay, I'm that's the last I'm going to talk about, how heroic scale is doesn't make any sense in miniatures.
Uh-huh. Yet another.
But for Malifaux, if you don't like that style, because it is very stylistic, they're like, you will see people that are much more stretched out. They're not necessarily realistically proportioned. And if you don't like that artistic style, then maybe you won't like it. But overall, the actual sculpt of the sculpt quality is quite high. Although sometimes some of the what do you call it? I do see some miniatures who are a little bit stiff, right? As
Mhm.
if they were designed with, I don't know, like a doll, basically, right? They're positioned like a doll as opposed to a normal human body that bends and contorts and can
It needs the balance.
stretch in different ways. It's not like your arm is not just 2 sticks, right? Or 3 sticks, right? And your spine is not like, I don't know, one curved stick. Your spine can curve and move in all different ways, right? So when sometimes the Malifaux, like not all the time, sometimes the Malifaux models are great. They look exactly like the art, right? They're proportioned and whatever. But sometimes I do see that, I don't know if you call it lazy or whatever, but they just, the guys look like it's just positioned on a doll, as opposed to with not the full human range of motion, right? And you can kind of tell that they just, modeled the leg, and then they just kind of stuck the leg that way, and then they modeled the general body, and then they just kind of like warped it a bit to make it kind of look like how it's supposed to, but it doesn't necessarily fully model what a real person would be like. But
Mhm.
like that's pretty. I think the reason why you might see that more in Malifaux than other models is because Malifaux models in general, they try to make them very dynamic. Like they're
Okay.
very kinetic in movement. So in some ways, you could say that where they fail, it's more obvious uh,
They're doing
because they're
something.
trying to be more ambitious. Yeah.
Mhm.
But when they hit, man, the models look great.
Yep. So, in terms of like, we played it, and
Mhm.
it was my first time, probably basically my first time playing a whole game. It did take us quite a long time to get through a
Mhm.
whole game. It took us 4 hours, I think.
Yeah, it was ridiculously
But that was
long.
basically learning
Especially
the
remember, this is 6 to 10 models on each side.
yes,
So
and
4 hours is a very long time, but there is some reasons for that, which I guess you're going to go through.
yeah, it's learning the rules, which the rules themselves are not super complicated. It's once you get to the actual abilities of the guys, just being
Mhm.
able to keep track of them and needing to go back as like if you're not an experienced player, you have to keep going back and reading them to make sure you know which abilities which guy has. The stat lines aren't super complicated. They don't range hugely. They stay in a fairly narrow band. So those
Mhm.
for a miniature game are easy enough to learn. It's just the
Yeah.
back and front of the cards are just covered in rules for every unit.
Yeah. So, like the core game, I think the most complicated thing is the terrain rules. The core gameplay is in and of itself, the core loop is quite cool. So, like Malifaux, I think a lot of people. So, besides the fact that the models are great, right? The next thing is that it has this cool mechanic where you have you instead of using dice, you use a deck of cards, and what that allows them to do is, following along the kind of cowboy kind of aesthetic, you
Just
basically have a
thinking of playing in a saloon. Yeah.
yeah, you're playing a saloon. You have a hand of cards, and basically, normally when you try and do an action, you just flip a card, and it's like high card wins, right? So
Mhm.
it's not like you're trying to do full on poker hands, but high card wins. But you have a hand of cards, and you're allowed to replace any cards you play that flipped up with a card from your hand.
In most cases, yeah. Well, not every
Yeah,
case, but in lots of cases.
yeah, basically whenever you have a competitive flip, so whenever you're flipping against an opponent, you can replace that card or do a
Mhm.
skill test, right?
Yeah, which
And
means you can sort
so
of plan things out a little more. It's not fully random.
yeah, exactly, right? And the suits matter. So sometimes, even if you get a high number, you want a specific suit to come up. And normally that would be quite hard if it's just, you flip a card to see it. But because you have a hand where you can replace it with a card of that suit, if it doesn't come up, it adds a little bit more planning, an ability to plan. And it's not just about risk reduction, which oftentimes you have for miniature games, right? For dice games, where it's about kind of like mathematically calculating what is your actual risks before you take it and before you want to commit, right? Whereas for this game, you can kind of do a little bit less of that because you're basically playing, you already know that you could force the success if you need to, right?
Mhm.
So for players that hate or cannot really, yeah, cannot or really hate the what do you call it, the
Just high level.
actuarial kind of decision making in normal dice games, right, where you have to do a lot of the calculations on whether this is a good move or not before
Yeah, say
you
if you've got
can.
like 5 dice, you're like, oh, I need this many hits. I have 5 dice. What's the percentage? You just
Yeah,
even
and
your
what is the
stuff.
alternative, what happens if I fail, what happens if I do it, and then have to plan all that before I actually make the decision. This one you can kind of do more like, oh, well, I know I can force it if I need it, so I don't have to necessarily calculate all of those things. And I know there's a lot of like guys that are kind of bad at or like I said, bad or don't like it. I guess I'm showing my bias saying, oh, they're just bad at this. But I feel like a lot of people complain are just bad at it. But if you don't like that kind of calculation, right? That kind of actuarial nature of prediction and stuff like that. Um, Malifaux with the card things helps alleviate that and make it not as bad. Of course, it still comes up because your opponent can also flip and your opponent can also cheat. So you still have to calculate it somewhat, but it helps make it by being able to cheat, it helps mitigate your need or your how important it is to calculate all that stuff beforehand.
Yeah, and I think that mechanic works really well in Malifaux because what you're doing for most of your turn, or at least most of your tactics, revolve around trying to pull combos off with your units. Like one guy moves another guy possibly up into range, or another guy like increases the damage on something, and then you basically like go from one guy to the next trying to pull things off. So I think
Yep.
that works really well, that you know you can actually keep that combo going because of the cards you have in your hand. So
Yeah.
it's a good mechanic from Alpha.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That the reason why this game took 4 hours, besides the fact that we were learning, there's some complicated edge cases. The idea that like there are so many rules makes this game very, very deep and very, very card gamey. Like if you like Magic the Gathering and combos and like creating, what do you call those? Rube Goldberg machines, right? And this is something that people love if you're like generally if you're into Magic cards and like combos and things like that, or sort of Magic the Gathering the game, not Magic cards. Or if you liked War Machine and that kind of gameplay, I think Malifaux is definitely of that style, right? Where you love combos. If you love comboing, you love looking at different kind of guys with a billion different abilities and trying to create your Rube Goldberg win condition, this is right up your alley. But that makes the game very, very complicated and very deep, and deep in a way that is rules intensive, which means you need to know, you have to have a lot of institutional knowledge to play this game.
Yeah, because we played War Machine for a long time, which this felt a lot like War Machine. So we weren't like, oh, we've
Yeah.
never played games like this before. But
Yeah.
most War Machine models don't have quite that many rules on them as this. And I think with War Machine, you have like units that go up to 10 guys often. So your positioning on the board matters quite a bit more for like where you can make your charge ranges. But in this, it dials that back a little and leans more into putting the combos off, which I think in a game that's based around doing combos, like you don't want too many guys on the board. Otherwise, there's too
You
much
don't
stuff to
necessarily
move.
need them, right?
It drags the game down to move like 5 guys around, which are just performing one function.
Yeah, exactly. Like War Machine, you might have like 20, 30 guys on, but like it's really just about changing the area control of your unit. You really still only have like 6 to 10 units on the table. It's just one unit consists of 6 guys, whereas in Malifaux, it consists of 1 guy.
Yeah, and he has more wounds. They might all have 1 wound each, but now you've got a guy with like 5, 8 wounds on him. So
yeah, definitely. And so the game, I think that's like good and bad, but it's very, very dependent on what you're looking for in a game.
Yeah.
And this makes the game also not really a beer and pretzels game.
You have to be on the ball, and you've got to be on the ball. You got to be concentrating. You have to have your plan like lined up pretty well ahead. You've got to have the distances right as well to make sure you can actually make the charge. So
yeah, if you're playing, like when we played, we tried to help each other, right? Figure out what's best to do next and all that kind of stuff. So we talked it out, but if and that's probably, if you play that way with a group that does that, it's probably becomes a lot easier to play. But if you're playing with a group that is hyper competitive and won't help you and is actually just hoping for you to make a mistake in the rules to win, you're gonna have a bad time, or you're gonna have to study like a lot. Like this game is not a side game, right? It's very hard for this game to be a side game.
No, you need to have memorized all your guys' abilities, and beyond that, if you want to play it well, you need to have memorized your opponent. So if you attack them, they aren't just going to like move away. Because we both had units where you attack them, they just kind of okay, find it.
Yeah,
they just move.
Yeah, and if you're playing like in a competitive thing where they just said okay, and then after you do it, and you're expected to follow up and attack, and they're like, well, my ability is to move away, and you just got screwed, like it does not feel good, right? And however, if you're playing like good friends like us, they would tell you before, you're like, after you do this move, I get to move away. Do you still want to do that? Then you can be a lot, depending on your community, it can be a lot. you have a very different experience when you play, right? And the game is can be more or less forgiving, very much based on the group that you're playing with. I know we mentioned War Machine, and I think there's a lot of people maybe who got burned in that kind of thing, but still might like that kind of gameplay. I think Malifaux is in general kind of an upgrade to War Machine.
Okay.
There's a couple of things that make it, in my opinion, better. I think the one thing you mentioned, right? It has less guys, so it's just easier to concentrate on the comboing, right? Which is the main thing.
Also, I think with the big difference between those games too is that one is sort of an all-in-one turn with War Machine.
Yep.
And then in Malifaux, it's alternating activations.
Yeah.
So the puzzle you can sort of conjure up in War Machine, you can conjure up something really crazy in War Machine because all your, like, say 9 elements could all just activate at once before your opponent does anything. Whereas in Malifaux, okay, you start trying to pull
for half an hour as well. It could take half an hour for you to combo off. And if you're in a tournament, you want to take as slow of a time as you can, just so that you don't make a mistake.
Yep.
Whereas it's terrible for your opponent, by the way, in terms of gameplay, in terms of fun.
Yeah. In Malifaux, you can't guarantee to pull off a combo that long because your opponent, if they know what they're doing, will start seeing the combo being built and then try and move to break it, which is actually like probably more entertaining rather than just sitting there watching your opponent destroy you.
Yeah.
While you do nothing. So
it's much less Rochambeau. So that makes it feel a lot more interactive. Oh, it's not just feels, it is a lot more interactive, right? And you can still build the combos, but like being able to pull off the combo while your opponent is, trying to interrupt you feels a lot more satisfying. And, the combo is not going to be the quote unquote perfect whatever combo because your opponent is reacting, but getting it off well enough to get what you want done feels like more rewarding and more interactive and more fun when you can pull it off, right?
Yeah, because you've now gotten around your opponent rather than your opponent like doing nothing against it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And oftentimes you can still, like, I know I said, the cheating allows you to pull off combos and stuff like that. Overriding kind of the more the odds based kind of like handling of normal dice games, but you still have times in the game because you can every round you only have 5 cards to cheat, and you might have bad cards in the hand, right? You get a random number of 5 cards, so it allows you to still have the fun of, like, there will be times when you're both cheating, right? So you're both trying to, like, you might cheat a really good card, your opponent will then cheat a good card, right? So you still have this resource that ends up running out, especially in the critical turns, and then you still end up having the occasional times where you're just trying to get the heart of the cards thing. And I know it's the same kind of thing, like you still get the points, in a normal dice game it's like, oh, I need a 6, right? Or to win. And then you're like, you get it and you're like, yeah, that's awesome, right? You still get those feelings in Malifaux, even with the cards, because you're both, your good cards get mitigated by your opponent. And then as the turn, the actions happen in the turn, at the end of the turn, you're reliant on whatever, you run out of cards that you can play. So you're still reliant. And when that card pulls up in your favor, you still get that great feeling of like, you just won the jackpot, right? Just like, similar to the thing, like, I don't know, like in card games, right? When in Magic the Gathering, if you're down and you're like, oh my God, I need my whatever card, right? So that I can combo off, right? And you're like, you gotta, or in Yu-Gi-Oh, right? You're just like, I need the heart of the cards to pull up this card to win, right? You still have those actions that happen in Malifaux.
Yeah, the part of the faction I played, because I played Neverborn, I found interesting and didn't expect, was that there's actually a bit of a deck building mechanic to it. Even though obviously the cards aren't what give you the abilities, that you can basically burn out parts of your deck and discard them. So what's left of your deck, because obviously, well, in the game, when you finish drawing your deck, you reshuffle it and go again. So if you start removing crappy cards from that deck, it's kind of functioning like a deck builder where you keep improving the quality of your deck throughout the game if you can remove cards. So that was sort of an interesting mechanic I didn't expect
Mhm.
to see exist in the game.
Yeah, this is one of those things where I feel like I was surprised at how well Malifaux's, like we said, there's so many rules and everything on these cards, right? I was surprised at how well the Malifaux theme shines through these rules. Like you're playing the Dreamer, who is this boy who basically, when he dreams, he can basically he manifests on on Malifaux and controls a bunch of dream
Like
monsters who
like
get
some
summoned into
demons, imps.
existence.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it really felt like that's what he was doing, right? He was summoning these monsters, and depending on the emotions of my side, right? When I fail a willpower check, you can
Mhm.
summon another monster, right? That was very cool thematically, and it really like the design and the character of the army really came through on the units, right? It wasn't just, oh, these are cool mechanics. It's like these are based on a theme, and it really played out to make it seem like you're summoning monsters and dreaming and stuff like that. And then I played Shen Long, which is this he's supposed to be like a Shaolin monk with like who's the master of like, I don't know, 5 different Shaolin styles. And I really felt it where I'm like charging my key, and then I'm switching styles for the right style for the time to do the action. It really sold the idea of like these martial artists, right? Fighting these dream monsters. And so I was really surprised how, even though like, I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily like all of these rules, like these super rules heavy games, I have to say that they did help make, like, add on to the theme and allow these characters to feel very individual and very thematic in how they acted on the battlefield.
Yep, yeah, I would agree with that. Other parts about it, style, War Machine. Hmm.
Yeah, so overall I think I I guess overall I think it was quite good. I don't like we're just beginners, so we have no idea, like, because it's super rule heavy. One of the issues that you often have in these type of games is that it becomes imbalanced, and we have no idea if the game is balanced or not. I will say that we played the game out and we ended up in a tie. So
Mhm.
so I guess for us it ended up being balanced, right?
Well, so
Uh,
they put out the cards online though. You obviously bought the pack of cards, but they do put them out online, so they have the ability to balance things.
oh yeah. Oh yeah,
Which,
actually that was one thing that was annoying to me. Like I bought the cards when they came out. So this is the third edition of Malifaux
mhm.
um, that we're playing. And I bought the card deck, but when we were playing, I was like, how come this guy doesn't have uh
Well, half you had
damage?
one half the room was written. You're like, oh, okay, here's the attack. Where's the stats for the attack? Oh, they're missing.
Yeah. Turns
Which,
out that this card deck that was printed had errors in it. So that was annoying.
mhm.
But the good thing is all these rules and all these cards are free. Like Malifaux gives out these cards for free, and they're like online. And these cards are really nice. Like the ones that they sold in a pack is really nice. They're like extra large, I don't know, tarot size. They're a little bit, I don't know if they're tarot size. They're like weird size. They look great, but it was just super disappointing when there are errors in these beautiful cards that I don't know how I'm gonna work this. I guess I have to just marker in the damage and tell another player if I'm playing, like, trust me, this is what it says online. However, the great thing is, like, if you don't buy the cards, you can learn how to play this game, get all the cards for free. You only pay for the models.
Yeah, the rules are free online as well. Which, if you want to get other people into the game, it's way easier to get people into the game when they can go read the rule without having to invest in the game. So,
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that I guess we kind of skipped over about, the miniatures and everything like that. Malifaux is actually really cheap to get into.
yeah, when you compare like the single box models to GWs, like single individual models, obviously you don't have all the customization options. But when
Mhm.
you buy single minis in Malifaux, it's nowhere near as expensive.
Yeah, I think there's some ways you can think about it. Like like a box of 5 or 6 minis is it's like 40 to 60 or something like that, right? Depending on the size. If you compare it to like infantry in Games Workshop, I guess the Games Workshop infantry might be cheaper, but the characters that you're getting are much more designed. They're like, right? So it's a lot of the characters you're getting are much more akin to the character packs in Games Workshop, which are ridiculously expensive, right? Like certain characters like Jane Czar is worth the same price as, I don't know, 10 Guardians or 11 Guardians, right? If you were to buy them, which is like a weird spread. Whereas Malifaux is generally, normally priced based on the box, right? So it's much more reasonable in terms of the cost per model, right? Everything's a little bit more normalized.
Yeah, and you don't need very many models either. So
Yeah.
if you decide to build a fully fleshed out army, it's not going to run you huge amounts of money.
Yeah, like there's a ton of starter boxes, right? Like that's generally how you buy into an army, is that you buy a starter box. And the starter box, I think the normal game is, I've already forgotten, was it 50 soul stones or something like that?
Yeah, I think so.
I think, and then your leader and their totem is free. So it's actually, leader and totem are generally like another 20 or something soul stones. So it's technically the game is 70 soul stones, but it's priced at 50 soul stones. But 10 of those soul stones you can use just to get extra rerolls and stuff like that, right? So you don't even have to spend the full 10. So you just need 60 soul stones worth of points, and each box that starts out comes with like 30 or something like that. Or no, 30 plus the leader. So it like comes with 50. So like you only need like the one box plus one or two other, like plus technically one other box, right? Which ends up being what, like $70 or something like that for like 8 models. So 7 or 8 models. So it becomes very reasonably priced if you want to get into this game, right? It's definitely under $100 to get in, and you can literally choose the specific master that you want. And this game, by the way, I guess we didn't mention that, is that it's master focused. So you choose your leader, and then the leader you choose then tells you what units you can bring, right? And basically every unit has a faction and then also keywords. And so when you choose your master, any unit with the same keywords you can include in your army, and any unit that doesn't have those keywords but is in the same faction you can include but it costs 1 extra soul stone, right? Extra point basically for the game. So in terms of cost of getting in the game, this is one of the cheapest games to get into, right? Like I guess it's the same price as Kill Team, right? The starters of Kill Team is what, 55 or $60?
Yeah, for the small starters, not the bigger action packs.
Yeah, except you don't have to buy the extra $50 rule book to play the game. So it's actually $50 cheaper than Kill Team, or $60 cheaper than Kill Team to get into.
Yep. I think you can still do a lot of like list theory crafting, even though your list is relatively small. I think you can spend a lot of time like theory crafting out lists, despite there only being 9 guys, just because of all the
that's
combo.
the other thing. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, just because of all the combo elements that go on. Like just the fact that you include 2 of something instead of 1 can hugely change the playstyle of your army, because you've only got 9 things on the table.
Yeah.
So, and obviously like the total max allocation of any unit is usually quite low. So you're never gonna like have to spend piles of money to go out and buy crap loads of one thing just because they made it an option. Usually the limits are pretty low, and they kind of correspond to the boxes, it looks like.
Yeah, and I think so you can play that kind of card or deck building or army building side game that you have in normal miniature games, right? Which Kill Team, Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team does not have anymore, right? It's very, very limited in terms of that army building. And another thing that's good is the army builder for Malifaux is free online.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so how I built the armies was like literally the free army builder. I think you go to their site and it's just like an online thing, and it has links to the cards. That's why I knew that the card that was printed was wrong, because I was like, this doesn't make sense. And then I looked at the army builder, and it pulls up the actual card that you could use. And I looked at it and I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah, the points are
that's
quite
fine.
low. So the points are quite low. So I don't think you're gonna have to rely on the army builder. Unlike games that
Yeah,
go up to like 2,000 points, you're like, when I'm
yeah,
adding to 2,000, I would like a program, please.
yeah. But it allows you to see exactly what you need, right? And allows you to like sift through the options that you could use. So the
Oh,
army builder is actually decent. Yeah.
yeah, because there are the add-on abilities as well, which
Yeah. So there's add-on abilities and there's units, like you don't necessarily, if you're trying to collect them, you don't necessarily know what units you could include, because unlike, I guess this is, I get again a good and bad things, right? It has positive and negatives, but like I said about the army composition, your leader can it doesn't isn't limited to units that are in its faction. It's limited to units with its keyword, which is a lot harder to look through in terms in the model line, right?
Mhm.
But on the army builder, it's very easy. Like you click on the leader, and then it just literally shows you the units you can bring, right?
Mhm.
So, and it allows you to. It's I don't know. I really like that kind of thing because of the way the what do you call it, the fluff of Malifaux is. The idea of these leaders being stuck in one faction instead of being able to pick and choose from units that would fall under the things they do makes a lot of sense in that world, right? It's not like the factions in Malifaux are much more nebulous. They're basically just like corporations and things like that. They're not like super specific, like
They don't
split
live in totally different places.
yeah, exactly. It's not like this army is from this area, right? And there's no way they could recruit someone from the other place. Actually, they all live in the same area. They're all like fighting each other and they're all recruiting people who fall under their purview, right? Like you could be a arcanist kind of person, but who likes building robots. So why couldn't you have guys who like building robots who are part of the Bayou, right? Or Bayou, right? So that kind of thing, right? So you can follow, so you still get the arcanist stuff, right? Sometimes they cost more, but you choose the units that fall under that kind of theme, which I like a lot.
Yeah, you're not too restricted. So you can build some crazy
Yeah.
armies, but you just pay more points if you start
Yep.
building something that's outside of the usual wheelhouse. Mhm.
Yeah. So I think the system is a little bit more complicated and a little bit harder to track. But because we have modern technologies like army builders and stuff, it actually becomes, it's not a problem with the army builder, right? Like the army
Mhm.
builder does all of that character selection for you. So you have no cognitive overhead when you're trying to build it.
Yeah, it does all the points adjustments too. Mhm.
Yeah, choosing the guys, points adjustments, all of that kind of stuff is calculated. So you don't have to worry about um, doing that unless you do it by yourself, like, right, which makes it a little more complicated if you're trying to build it on the go. But like if you have access to the army builder, it's not a problem at all.
Mhm. So,
And it's
so
free. The
who,
army builder is free, so like you just need access to the internet.
okay. So I think from our talk, we may not be the people who are the the best audience for the game, but who do you think is like the target group who's really going to like this?
Yeah, so I feel like this is a lifestyle game. So this is a game where if you really like the models and the themes and stuff like that, and you want to have this be your main game, this is like a perfect game for you if you like that kind of comboing off super deep rules interactions, right?
Mhm.
Things like if you liked War Machine or Hordes, or if you like Magic the Gathering, or that kind of like thinking about, oh, this guy has this ability which combos with this guy's ability, and then they come together and they do something cool. That kind of thing really excites you. I think this game is great for that. Also, if you really like that kind of thematic, those things feeding into your theme, where you have like, oh, uh, I want I want my characters to be, if I choose the martial artists, I want them to feel like martial artists who do like the special martial art thing, which is different than the guy who is the gun-toting cowboy side, right? Who does their cowboy thing, which is different from like the wizard, whatever, that kind of stuff. If you really like that kind of differentiation, and that really is important for you that your character is different, right, as a martial artist than the other one, as opposed to a lot of games that kind of make it more generalized, right? And the
Yeah.
theme is more just about the visual look, right? But then this game really helps sell that, right? The fact that you will be happy with all the additional rules that make your army feel unique, right? So I think that also really, really helps. All these characters in general are named. So if you wanted your own characters and run your own squad, you can't really do that, right? Because each master is literally a character in the world of Malifaux.
Yeah,
So you
and
have to,
a lot of your units are characters as well.
yeah. So if you like the character kind of dynamic, right? Where you don't write the stories of your guys, but you're playing guys that are unique and cool and like important in the universe. That's also part of the thing, right? So, but if you're the type of person that wants to, carve your own story with characters who are more generic and then they become yours, something more like Stargrave or whatever, then you're not going to like that as much. But I think the most important part is really just the comboing, like the idea that you want a super deep game, you love the miniatures, like the aesthetic, and you love that super deep kind of thing, and you wanted this to be your main game, and you're going to continue to play it with like a group of people. I think this is a very good game.
Yeah, I don't think you'd try and mix it with other main games. You're just not
Mhm.
gonna you're not gonna have the time to keep up with it. Like
Yeah,
playing
yeah.
some other big scale game like Age of Sigmar, if you're playing something big scale, if you're playing something really complicated like Infinity,
Mhm.
or there's other complicated games out there, but
Yeah, it's hard to double up because all of those games are kind of like style games, like main games,
mhm.
where like we love Infinity. But I guess at this point we've played Infinity enough, it can become a side game. But the reason why is because we played so much of Infinity, right?
Yeah, to like learn
That we
Infinity, you have
dedicate
to learn.
years of this being our main game, playing every single week almost, or sometimes even more than that, right? For us to get trained up enough that we don't have to play it every single week, but we can still have fun with it. I
Yeah,
think the
because
same thing is for Malifaux. Yeah.
Infinity just sort of has more units that makes it really difficult to memorize. That if you
Mhm.
want to know what that unit does, like what it looks like and generally how it functions, just because there's like 100+ units,
Yeah.
takes a
Yeah.
long time to like memorize all that content to the game. Whereas Malifaux, there's less units, but they all do way more, so it's going to take a lot of time to learn all the abilities.
Yeah. And I think the terrain rules are a little bit overly complicated in Malifaux. Um, they went through and made it very, I don't know, almost like a computer game kind of rules. But I don't think you necessarily need that complication to make it all work. But they have it. But that, I guess that's just a general complaint. But like, but that's the kind of thing, the way the game plays, right? It's very specific. All these kind of rules are very, very detailed. So honestly, I would consider playing this game if we didn't already have a bunch of other games that are our main games, right? Like we play Infinity and we play Frostgrave as main games. We have our own game that we play, and we have a bunch of other games that we play every once in a while. There's just not a spot to slot in Malifaux. However, if Infinity didn't exist,
Mm-hmm.
I could see playing Malifaux as a main game.
Yeah,
Because
because
we
like
like War Machine and stuff, and honestly, because the models are cool.
yeah, because if you enjoy deeper games and you like getting deep
Mhm.
into like the knowledge and theory crafting behind how you're going to play the game, then a lot of the simpler games like Frostgrave or Kill Team, they're not going to give you that. Like they're not going to reward you with trying to do that because it just doesn't exist within the
Mhm.
space.
And Scratch is a
But
different part of your brain.
yep, it's more just how you move your guys around the board and the whole story that goes on like on the board. But in terms of like planning things out before you ever get to the table, like there's certain games that really reward how you build your army beforehand, and this is one of them.
Mhm. Yeah, and then how you play them. A good thing is that I feel like how you play them on the table matters, especially because every single master is different, and how even if you know your general game plan, you have to react to what your opponent is doing. So it'll always be I think not always, but there's a lot of like interplay on how it ends up playing on the table. Um, yeah, so I guess I'm actually quite positive on this game. It's just we have too many other games, and Infinity scratches that itch for me. And although Malifaux is a good game, I think Infinity is a better game, basically. But it's very
Yeah,
different. It's like I think overall it's a better game, and it's overall more about placement on the battlefield and like hidden knowledge and stuff like that, which makes
agreed.
I think Infinity more fun for me. But I can't say that Malifaux would not be the right game for people over like I couldn't. What am I saying? Malifaux. I could see that people would say Malifaux is the game for them,
Yep.
and I couldn't be like, oh no, you should play other games because this game is like I feel like it is kind of the games in its kind of class where it's like super complicated kind of next level kind of what do you call it, card gamey kind of mechanics. This is the best game I've of that type I've played in a yeah honestly I think this is the best of that game of that type that's out there right now.
Yeah, and usually when we play games for the first time, there's things you're like, oh, this is really weird. Why in the world did they do that? That impression didn't come around through Malifaux. So
Yeah, again we're beginners so maybe there's some issues that we're not seeing, but at least on first impressions every things did look very well thought out, right? And a lot of effort seemed to be put in for to make it very clear about what's supposed to be happening and stuff like that, like in Magic the Gathering, right, where you're supposed to be able to look at the card, know like it might be super complicated but you just read the card and it'll tell you what it does, right? In the same way Malifaux, at least the armies that we built felt like they were very very specific and you kind of knew what they were doing, right? If you read the card, even though sometimes you had to read a lot of text because there's a lot of text on those cards.
yeah.
Yeah. All
All
right.
right.
So I think overall, I don't know. I'm quite positive. I don't know. What do you think?
No, it's odd to be very positive about a game and be like, yeah, I don't need to play that anytime in the next 2 years.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's just like I have games that fill the spot that hit what I want a little bit more. But this game is super good. I totally recommend it for people that like that theme and stuff. And like I have a bunch of armies for this game, especially because I think these are the best like kung fu minis for 28 millimeter on the market. I don't think it's kind of weird because it's like one portion of faction, right? But these are the best kind of like Asian inspired, Chinese or Japanese kind of models that are out there. And I might be a little bit biased because these are some of the only miniatures that are not heroic scaled and for these kung fu minis. But like to me, these are like the best that are out there right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, Malifaux is more like
Also for cowboys too.
yeah, unfortunately, Malifaux is more like 35 millimeters tall. So trying to like fit it in with your
No,
other
it's not 35.
in these games.
35
Oh,
is really is a lot bigger. It's around 32.
okay.
I would not say it's 35. It's definitely bigger than Infinity.
Okay.
But it doesn't get up to
It's now
35.
3 millimeters bigger because Infinity's 32 currently. So
It is not 32.
well,
Is it?
I've seen them claim 32 on their sites. So
I thought it was more like 30. It's definitely, I don't know. The scales are all weird. I
mhm.
don't think that they are bigger than Games Workshop models. They look bigger because they have realistic proportions. So they don't look like cartoon big head guys. But I don't think actually in terms of height, they're actually taller than Games Workshop models.
Well, I wasn't ever considering using GW models for anything else, so that's okay. I don't. It's
So
not.
yeah, Games Workshop models are slightly bigger too, right? So I guess if you consider Games Workshop 35, then yeah, maybe.
Mhm.
So yeah. But I have a whole bunch of them. But yeah, like you said, I'm not gonna play this that much. But I don't know. If Infinity died and we still had a Malifaux community, I consider playing it.
Yep. So if you have Malifaux communities in your area and you lack other
Support
games,
them. Great game. If you're wondering about playing this game, definitely get into the game. See if you like it. See if this can become your main game. Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, I think we covered our first impressions pretty well there.
Yep. Yeah, if you have any thoughts about Malifaux, yeah, give us a shout. If you have any questions or thoughts or whatever, yeah, you can contact us at contact@diceovereverything.com.
Yeah, or find us on Facebook or Dice Over Everything, or let us know what you're up to it by joining Dice Over Everything group.
All right, this has been Alan.
It's been Brandon.
Bye.